Katie Herzog was a writer at The Stranger. She's no longer there because she was furloughed, and she offered herself to be furloughed. And now she's independent. She has a podcast called Blocked and Reported, and you should go and join her Patreon. She's incredibly bright. She's a breath of fresh air. All the things you would say about somebody who's canceled all the time. That's what you say. When someone's canceled, you go, what a breath of fresh air they are. But she's great. I was in Palm Springs and we tried to do this interview, but the Wi-Fi wasn't working. Now it is much better. We wanted to have Raz Simeon, the leader of the Seattle Autonomous Zone, because they had reached out to us. You know, they had contacted me on Instagram. Raz had retweeted me. Maybe they had in the interim found some of my earlier work, or maybe they had just gotten cold feet, or maybe Raz is reading emails from the CIA about what he should do next. I don't know. But they are welcome to come. I hope we have Raz in the future. But Katie Herzog is here with us now. What is your read on the Seattle Autonomous Zone? Are you going to go and explore it?
Well, first of all, you're getting the name wrong. You are dead naming the Seattle Autonomous Zone. It's actually the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, which is probably the funniest part of all this. It sounds like a tennis coach. I find this whole thing extremely funny. So what people from outside Seattle might not know is that the area where this is happening, where they have declared an autonomous state outside the jurisdiction of the United States, is in a really highly gentrified neighborhood. And my former office is actually in Chaz. So if I were still working at The Stranger, I would be entering the zone every day, which would be sort of ironic because right now, apparently during the protest, someone graffitied "fuck Herzog" on the door of The Stranger. So it might be a little bit awkward for me to try to get to work through Chaz at this point. Luckily, that doesn't happen. So this area is super highly gentrified. It's the historic gay neighborhood in Seattle, and it still has like rainbow crosswalks and lots of gay people and stuff like that. But it's also really expensive. It's mostly like, like chain ramen shops and $3,000, $4,000 studio apartments. A lot of Amazon workers live there. So I keep imagining what the well-heeled upper middle class Amazon workers think about their new overlords. And there's also, so they've taken over this park, and the park is surrounded by multi-million-dollar condos and townhouses. And so I'm really curious about what the residents of Chaz think about what is happening to their neighborhood. And I'm sure some are totally supportive, and I'm sure some are just absolutely terrified.
Why is the Pacific Northwest historically been a bastion of a lot of activism, and a lot of anarchists are out there? What is going on over there? Is it the rain? Is it the weather? Are you on some type of, is it an energy vortex? What is happening with Portland and Seattle and these places that make them such a hotbed of this type of activity?
That's a great question. I don't know the history of this, how long this has been going on. I mean, 20 years ago were the WTO riots in Seattle, which were the World Trade Organization had a meeting there, and the city just erupted into total chaos, much like we're seeing now, although a lot of it seems to have calmed down. And Portland, of course, has its own fair share of activism. The cities are different in some important ways. And what's happening in Portland, and to a lesser extent in Seattle, is that so both of these are very blue cities that are surrounded by more conservative suburbs and rural areas. And so in Portland, what you will have is like Proud Boys or Patriot Prayer or something, these conservative groups come in from the suburbs or the rural areas and just sort of stage their marches there. And it's a lot of American flags and pro-Trump stuff. And then Antifa and other affiliated anarchists and just people who like to fight in the streets will just come in and respond to them. And there's this clash, and it feels very much like LARPing, like cosplay, sort of revolution cosplay, where nothing actually changes. Nobody's mind is changed. Just some shit gets destroyed. And then everybody, the Proud Boys go back to their suburbs, and Antifa goes back to the co-ops that they live in, or their parents' basement, or whatever. So it is interesting. Both areas do tend to be hotbeds for this sort of political activism. I mean, also, both areas are sort of the cities, at least, are politically very homogenous. So you have basically no presence of a Republican Party. And I think when you have an ideologically homogenous area, what happens is extremism. If you don't have anyone to sort of check your ideas, they just sort of naturally flow to the edges of acceptable thought. So I think that's also probably a part of it.
We hear a lot about Antifa and you see them and you see the things they do and they're absurd. And then we see they're directing traffic and they're not letting people go. Who is Antifa? Is there any organization? Is it just a ragtag group of, what is it? Is it, in your estimation, a terrorist network? What is it? And does it deserve that type of designation? What is it?
I do not think Antifa is a terrorist organization. I don't even think Antifa is a big threat to cities like Portland or Seattle that do have a larger presence of Antifa. It's just a group. Anybody can join Antifa or Black Bloc or whatever. You just put on the outfit and you go hold up a protest sign or cover your face with a balaclava. Although these days everybody's face is covered, so a little bit harder to pick Antifa out of a crowd. It's not. There's no hierarchy. It's anarchist in nature, and Antifa sort of appears at moments and then disappears as soon as the fight is over. It's not. This is not. They don't have much political. They don't have any political power. They're not a democratic group. I guess they're far left, but they don't have political ideals in the way that we think of, those sort of get people elected, go through legislative process. I think their aims are much more about dismantling the state, dismantling capitalism. And I'm sure there's lots of people who are committed to the cause, and there's also lots of people who just like to play pretend, like to sort of get all pissed off and go break some windows.
We were going to do a sketch called Fat Antifa, where me and my co-host Ray Kump were going to dress up in all black, and it was guys that were going to a march but kept getting sidetracked by different fast food places. And then at the end, we just attack a Trump supporter, like a 14-year-old, and they beat the shit out of us. And it just, we never filmed it, but it was an idea that we had. When you look at these protests, and there's such valid anger, right? There's such righteous, justified anger. Dave Chappelle did an amazing job at articulating it. Is the major disconnect with a lot of these protests how any of them lead to political change? How does a group of angry people who are very justified in their anger, how do they affect the political process? Many people believe that can no longer happen, that we're living in a time where elections, don't matter at all, even local ones, and that this chaotic energy will just be a means and an end, where these systems will all somehow magically be remade. I don't know, but is that one of the issues that you're looking at this and going, you have this anger, it makes a lot of sense, it's very justified, but then a lot of it seems to be directed at ending isms and racism and capitalism. And it seems well, wait a minute, why don't we focus on one thing at a time, which is ending police brutality? And then people say, well, that's a function of your privilege you're talking about. It's just a function of my logical brain going, right. How are you going to end an ism during a pandemic and an economic meltdown? So what do you see as the biggest issue with these protests really enacting any type of real reform or change?
Well, I think the problem is that the loudest activists are oftentimes out of touch with the American people. And so even if people who support the protests, who recognize that police brutality is a problem, that corruption in police forces is a problem, that racism is a problem, and the two things can be disconnected, police brutality, white people, Asian people, Hispanics, everybody is affected by police brutality. Actually, Native Americans are the group most affected by it. And so if you divorce it from sort of the cause of Black Lives Matter, I personally think you would have more legislative success, because you can build a bigger coalition if you say police brutality and bad policing affects every community in this country, every race in this country. And that's not going to alienate white people, particularly conservative white people, I think as much as the current sort of protests have the potential to do. And so you have that problem. And then you have the problem of sort of the sloganeering, right? So what you see in the streets and what you see on the news, if you turn on the news, is people chanting things like abolish the police, defund the police. These are not popular positions among the American populace. You know, the protesters, as righteous as they feel, and I do think they have, you know, just reasons to be angry and to feel righteous themselves. But these radical policy positions like abolishing the police are not popular even among Black communities that suffer from the highest rates of violence. What they actually, when you look at polls of Black communities, typically what they say is, we don't want to abolish the police. We want functional police. We want the police to help us when we call them, to not ignore us and not to brutalize us, not to defund them and there's some irony here when you talk about defunding the police. Well, if you defund the police, that means there will be fewer policemen, police people on the police forces, which means that response times when somebody calls 911 are going to go up. And according to the Seattle Police Department, this is already happening right now. And they also have spewed a fair amount of bullshit, so we have to take everything that they say, I think, with some skepticism. The police chief, for instance, this week said that in Chaz, businesses were being shaken down for money, and basically the residents of Chaz were extorting the local, their new tenants. And it turns out that this doesn't appear to be true. So I think we should be skeptical. That said, once you talk to people, if you talk to protesters and you say or the leaders of these protests, I guess in some cases self-appointed leaders, and you might say like, well, what do you mean by abolish the police? And they say like, oh, we don't really mean abolish the police. We mean like break the police force down and rebuild it up as something different, or defund the police and use the money for community policing. But when you rely on slogans, it's like build the wall, or something like that. It's just sort of an empty slogan. And I think this has the capacity to really turn people off. I mean, that said, I think they're seeing some successes. San Francisco today, the mayor of San Francisco announced some police reform, some reforms to the police department that could actually have an impact on police brutality. Minneapolis, it looks like they are going to sort of defund the police and try to rebuild it into a community policing organization or something like that. Who knows if that will be any different?
Did you see that Andrew Yang tweet where he goes, "Why don't we just call them the Guardians?"
Yeah, I did see that. I mean, but the thing is, like, you can change the name, and if you still have the same populace, it's not going to actually change anything. So I think a lot of the sloganeering is empty, or it's out of touch with how most Americans feel. But we are seeing, I think, some successes from this group, and we'll see how long it goes. I think there's potential for leaders to emerge that maybe could have a future in politics. Although I'm not sure that anybody that I'm aware of has particularly emerged on the national stage at this point.
Breonna Taylor's law just got passed where they're getting rid of no-knock warrants, which are, right. That's a step in the right direction. But there seems to be this wing of people that aren't happy with the word reform, and they don't like incremental change of any kind, and they don't like even me saying things like that's a step in the right direction. They believe that the only way to fix this system is to tear it all down. Now, to people like myself and others that are marginally intelligent, we realize that that's not possible. Like, it's not going to happen. And if you defund the police, rich communities are going to hire private police forces that probably have less accountability than the public police forces right now. You've had a lot of issues as a writer in terms of people getting angry at you. People have called you a TERF, which means you're a trans exclusionary radical feminist or something, right? Isn't that what that means?
That's the acronym. I am not a TERF or a radical feminist, or really even a feminist at this point.
Right.
So I guess I'm just radical if I'm not a trans exclusionary or a feminist.
I think you wrote an article on Jordan Peterson that angered people. What was the beginning of Katie Herzog being on the outs at The Stranger, which is we would say is a very left-wing publication out of Seattle, and you became like persona non grata there. How did that happen?
It actually happened before I was hired. So I was a freelancer writing in Seattle, and one of the first pieces that I wrote for The Stranger was called "The Detransitioners," and it was about people who transition from one gender to the other and then change their mind and transition back. And this was in 2017, and it caused just this like massive firestorm. Like people were literally burning stacks of the paper and sending me video of it. Just like there were flyers up in my neighborhood calling the paper transphobic, and my editors made transphobic. Like the coffee shops that I would go to, I would walk in and there would be like flyers calling me transphobic. So there was just a massive outcry. I don't know how many people who were mad about the piece actually read the piece, because the piece was not by any stretch of the imagination transphobic. I got the voices of lots of happily transitioned people in there. It was just about this sort of small subset and a phenomenon. It's something that is happening. And in the 3 years since the piece is published, it's the community of detransitioners has really emerged on their own. They're much more visible now, but this was sort of one of the earlier pieces about this phenomenon.
What attracted you to write about that? Were you concerned about maybe people transitioning too early? Did you have no agenda when you wrote it? Were you kind of like just interested in this group of people?
What I'm interested in is heretics and people who speak out at some cost to themselves. And I found that among the detransitioners that I spoke to. So oftentimes they felt really shunned by their own communities, the trans and queer communities that they had typically lived in, just sort of cast them out. And they continued to speak up about it despite the own social costs of themselves. You know, it's sort of ironic that after I wrote this piece, the exact same thing happened to me. And I sort of knew that it would. I had talked to other people who'd written not even critically about trans issues, but had written about trans issues in a way that didn't sort of parrot the contemporary party line. And they'd all had similar experiences. So it wasn't totally unexpected. And, you know, I'm a lesbian. I've lived in queer communities for, let's see, the last like almost 20 years of my life. And I did start to notice that more and more people were transitioning, you know, and there can be a lot of reasons for this. Like for one, people know about it, you know, it's possible now in a way that it wasn't before. But I started to notice this like things rapidly accelerated around 2016, 2017 in my community, where all of a sudden you would have a household that had maybe, you know, 5 lesbians all transition within the same year. And I just found it, I won't lie, I found it troubling in some respects, because it just seemed like statistically this is impossible. How could this entire community be deciding that they have, you know, they were born in the wrong body or they have gender dysphoria or whatever at the same time? It struck me as trendy, to be totally frank about it. And now that I make my money on Patreon, I don't have to worry about being canceled, so I can say things like this. So that's when I started to sort of look a little bit more critically at what was going on. And I think that my initial instincts have been sort of proven out, you know, several years later, that we are seeing this very, very rapid rise. And it's not something I'm overly concerned about. It's something I observe. You know, and in terms of adults are free to do whatever they want. If you want, like, to change your body, I think that is absolutely, you know, within your rights to do so. I would support anybody who does it. I do think it gets more complicated with children, though, because this issue has been studied for decades. And what most studies find is that children who report to gender identity clinics from a young age, by the time they're adults, between 60 and 90% of them will have decided that they don't want to transition, and they are fine living in their sex at birth, which I think is preferable in some ways. And I know there's a danger of saying that. Like, conservatives would always say, like, you know, wouldn't it be better if gay people couldn't be gay? But I think the difference is that being gay only causes you distress if you're receiving that message from society, right? I don't think there's anything inherently that if you didn't have sort of conservatives or Christians or any other group, not just Christians, Muslims, whatever, any sort of fundamentalist group saying that what you are is wrong, I don't think it would cause people distress inherently, you know, without that sort of social influence. But gender dysphoria is a condition. It's defined by distress, right? And so I think we need to be really cautious about pediatric transition, because what the research has found is that between 60 and 90% of kids who arrive at gender identity clinics eventually revert to their sex at birth, feel okay about it, So their dysphoria is alleviated, or they have found a different way of dealing with their dysphoria besides taking hormones and surgery that are, that cause permanent changes to your body and some side effects. And most of the children who grow out of it end up being gay or lesbian. And this has been repeated over and over and over.
Are these studies controversial? I would imagine they're controversial, but why are they ignored by many trans activists and people in that community? Why? What is the big push for? Why can't people just say, listen, when you're an adult, you should. Now, I know it's a complex issue because a lot of people say if you have true gender dysphoria, making you go through puberty as a gender that you are not is some form of abuse. That's right. The argument on the other side. But why do people not take these studies more seriously that say many of the people who do this end up regretting it on the other end?
Well, the reason for this is because historically there have been a lot of gatekeepers when it comes to trans healthcare. So until relatively recently, if you wanted to transition from one sex to the other or from one gender to the other, you would have to live as your preferred gender or sex for, I think, 2 years minimum before you could get hormones or surgery. You had to have a lot of meetings with therapists and doctors or things like this. It wasn't easy, and the model of healthcare has changed to what's now called informed consent. And under these sort of policies or best practices, informed consent basically means that someone goes to a doctor or a therapist and says, like, I'm trans, I have gender dysphoria. And there's also, as a sort of interesting aside, a lot of trans activists now say that you don't have to have gender dysphoria to be trans. But so regardless, and that you don't have to take hormones or surgery. You just say that you're trans or say that you're the gender that you want to be and you are without doing anything to change your body. That's a new phenomenon. I don't think we would have seen this 10 or 15 years ago for the most part. So after this informed consent model changed, all of the gatekeepers sort of disappeared. And for trans people, specifically trans adults, this is a really good thing because they did have to go through these sort of onerous processes to get the healthcare that they needed. And so now we've just sort of gone in radically the other direction, where you just go to a doctor and you say, I would like to have a double mastectomy, or I'd like to have surgery or whatever, and they'll do it. And I think you're going to see more false positives with not having gatekeepers. But I think there are good reasons for trans activists to push back on the gatekeeper model, because a lot of them live through it and are terrified that that something like this would happen again, or future generations will have to go through this onerous years-long process before they're able to get healthcare. So that's why they push back against these studies. I think they push back against them for valid reasons. They're concerned, but the problem is that the data doesn't disappear, right? That these lives don't disappear. You can ignore the study. You can argue with the methodology or whatever. Claim that the study is flawed in too many ways, but that's not going to change the reality, which is that the more children you have who transition at a young age, the more false positives you're going to have, and the more of them are going to regret it later on.
You've probably heard a lot of people talk about how crucial their morning routine is to setting up the proper tone for their day, whether it's waking up early, setting their goals for the day, exercise, meditation, or anything else. But not everybody has the time to do it all, or any of it, truly. With Hydrant, you can jumpstart your mornings. Top perform. I just took my friend's bulldog. My friend is a liar and a thief, and he got me to take his bulldog for 2 days because he said his bulldog just sleeps and doesn't do anything, and the dog is a literal terrorist. And the dog rolled down the window in the car, tried to get out. The dog is just, this is why you can't do anything for people. The dog is, they said it'll sleep. When it gets home, it just sleeps. Yeah, it just sleeps. That's what it does. It's tearing everything apart. But we were talking about the morning routine. You want to kick the coffee habit. We all do. It's bad for your stomach. You got to go to some cafe and wait in line, a bunch of losers. It's not good. I think he's chewing the cord now to the air conditioning. No coffee, right? You want to get rid of that. We all do. We're not naturally morning people. Here's the deal. We all wake up with sluggish. You want to avoid that midday slump. You need to make sure you're hydrated. So much of the problem of people that have cognitive issues, it's because you're not hydrated. You're actually dehydrated. Okay, even if you sleep well at night, you lose water and key nutrients throughout the night, and you're not able to put them back as you sleep. So more likely than not, you're starting the day on empty. So Hydrant created a refreshing electrolyte-packed drink that you mix directly into your water to efficiently and effectively hydrate your body. Each rapid hydration mix has 4 essential electrolytes your body needs: sodium, potassium, magnesium, and zinc. This precise balance of electrolytes found in their mix helps your body hydrate quickly and stay hydrated all day. And Hydrate is packed, it's backed. It's packed and it's backed. Okay? It's backed by research. It's backed by research. Okay? There's people in lab coats doing the work. The formula was developed by an Oxford scientist. Oxford is a top school in the UK, for many of you that don't know, because you're slugs. Oxford scientists to provide perfectly balanced, efficient hydration. There's no synthetic colors, stevia, or artificial sweeteners. The formula is vegan, and you can choose between 3 different flavors in a variety pack. Hydrant starts at just $1 packet for 30-day supply. You save even more with a monthly subscription to Hydrant. Start every morning off with a rush of hydration to feel better at what you do. Just gave it its toy. Start every morning with a rush of hydration to feel the best at whatever you do. It doesn't matter what you do. Contract assassin, doesn't matter. Unleash your inner morning person with Hydrant. You're trying to drink less coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Have you tried Hydrant?
Yeah, they sent us a bunch in that box. Yeah.
I swear to the loving God, I'm going to fucking kill it. What do you think of Hydrant?
I loved it.
You liked it. What are the best things about it?
Tastes great.
I'm going to cut off its air supply.
I feel like I don't really need cough anymore. Hydrant's a total replacement for that.
It's good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it too. It goes beyond flavoring water. Yes, our product is light, refreshing, and clean tasting, but it's our formula's precise blend of key electrolytes that are scientifically formulated to jumpstart the body's natural hydration process. For this reason, it's fucking late. Hydrant contains a small amount of natural cane sugar, but that's fine. It's not a mistake. Glucose is essential to activating the body's hydration process. Mm-hmm. You need a little glucose. So if you think that a little sugar is a mistake, you're wrong.
Yeah. And it's better to be hydrated rather than caffeinated, because then you have energy and you don't need the caffeine, which dehydrates you.
And you crash.
Right.
There is no crash here. Your body just flows.
He's ripping your headphone cable.
This is what happens when you don't have Hydrant.
This is what happens.
Just sit. Hydrant is not a hangover cure, but it doesn't market itself that way. That being said, hydration is important for getting rid of hangovers. So if hosts think that this is a compelling selling point, sorry. If you're drunk, then Hydrant could help. But it might not. But it might. Don't get out. Don't get down. You'll break your leg. Shh. You're a good boy.
Can he jump from that height?
We're going to take him down. Hydrant is a wellness and water win-win. Proper hydration can bring mental clarity, mental and physical performance. And you're going to need one when you take rubber bullets to the face. Can you scroll it down?
I think that's it. Oh, here we go.
75% of Americans are dead. I'm kidding. 70. It's going to be the ad we read in 2 months.
Right.
75% of Americans spend their days dehydrated. Here's where we come in. Launched in 2018, our team identified a need to develop a product that rapidly and effectively hydrates consumers. Our product, our dissolvable hydration mix. Just try it out. You get it, you put it in, you get it going, you figure it out. Buy the mix. Put it in the water. 25% off your first order. Drinkhydrant.com/Tim. Use promo code TIM, T-I-M at checkout. Drinkhydrant.com/Tim. If you enter the promo code TIM, you get 25% off your first order. Many of us suck in the morning. We are sluggish. We are grotesque. We do not have mental clarity and mental acuity. I think that's the word. We need it. We need to be sharp to get the jobs that aren't there. He's just like one muscle.
I know.
Never do anything for anyone. I mean, isn't that really what it is? Never do anything for anyone. Never help anybody. Hydrant is where it's at. I've used it. Ben has used it. You feel better. You don't crash. It's a little bit of cane sugar. It's not a big deal. So please, if you enjoy this show and you want a little boost in the morning, and you know you do because you're not performing adequately. We've spoke to your manager, and your manager says you're about to get out of here because you come in with puffy eyes, your face is puffy from boozing it up like a big booze bag because you can't deal with the fact that you didn't really go after any of the things you thought you were gonna in life. You're a middle-of-the-road, mediocre piece of shit. You know it and your family knows it. And their eyes burn through you every time they see you. You're embarrassed with your friends and you don't have any accomplishments to put on Facebook, so you just troll and write all lives matter and try to fuck with people. It's because you're not getting after it. You're not getting after it because you wake up like a fat, bloated piece of shit. Not with Hydrant. You drink Hydrant, your family and friends will love you, and you'll finally figure out what it feels like to accomplish something. You're a goddamn zero. Goddamn zero. And you have been. You're bad. You could get better, but you need the mix that goes into the water. I'm not a snake oil salesman, and I'm not telling you garbage. Here's what I am telling you. You put this mix in your water, you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror in a few days. And if you don't do that, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you've always gotten. And isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? Isn't it the truth? Hydrant, like fire hydrant. Just drinkhydrant.com/Tim and enter promo code TIM. Is he in the shot?
I think so, yeah.
He's an absolute monster. I mean, he's an absolute beast. His name's Duncan. Oh, I love Hydrant. When was the first time you had Hydrant?
Last week when they gave it to us.
And what happened?
I started getting better sleep because I
Had
was
a
drinking.
seizure. You go, actually, I don't know if it was related, but I had a seizure right after I tried it. It's the first one I ever had in my life. Katie got real scared. We called the ambulance.
I started shaking.
I started shaking. What happened? Seriously. What happened? What'd you do? What'd you do? Yeah.
I feel like I played better golf.
Yeah. That's all you do is play golf, huh?
That's about all I do, yeah.
Well, good for you. You know what happened the first time I took hydrant?
What happened?
I took the hydrant out of the package. I put it in the water. And I drank the water. And for a minute, I was like, yeah, I don't think it did nothing. But then you know what I did? I left my house, and I went and I beat the shit out of a cop. I saw 2 cops on the street. I took both of their guns, and I beat them both with batons. For 20 minutes. You know how long 20 minutes is? You just beat a cop mercilessly. They may be dead. I don't know. But I wanted to send a message. And you know what the message was?
What?
That I was hydrated. And I wasn't taking no more shit. You understand me? It's not just about feeling good. It's what are you doing when you're feeling hydrated? Mm-hmm. I went out and I fucked up a couple of cops. They were women. But it still counts. They're part of an oppressive system. Mm-hmm. You understand? I did it. Duncan, you're out of control. Yeah, he'll just sleep, they said. Yeah, he'll just go to sleep. So I'm going to tell you again, folks, I want you to get this drink because if you, like me, want to have the energy to go out and attack female police, drinkhydrant.com/TIM. Promo code TIM at checkout. Drinkhydrant.com/Tim. Try it. I mean, in all seriousness, you know we do these ads to be funny. We're comedians. This is what we do. But in all seriousness, this is a great way to replace coffee. It's a great way to replace any type of sugar. This is a great thing to do. Everybody I know is doing it, and they're all happy about it. Everybody I've ever met is trying this out right now because I give away all the stuff that I get here that they send me for free, and everybody feels really happy. You know, if you're a big drunk, and we know you are, and you wake up and you feel like shit, then at the end of the day, you could wake up and hydrate yourself. I'm gonna kill him. All right. Goodbye. Listen, let's talk about Mack Weldon. Okay? We founded Mack Weldon, not me, but they, because we wanted to more out of the basics and always question how something so essential could be such a pain in the ass to buy. The frustration was real, and our eureka moment happened in a department store aisle full of brands that dominated our top drawer. Surrounded by a mind-numbing assortment of underwear and socks, we realized consistent fit and quality became a game of roulette. So we decided to take matters into our own hands. We started from scratch and engineered our own fabric. We made sure the design process was meticulous so you can count on the fit being the same each time. We built a world-class customer experience. The difference is in the details, so we are obsessed with every stitch and seam until we reached our definition of perfect. Mack Weldon is better than whatever underwear you're wearing right now. They gave it to me, I have it. Mack Weldon is premium men's essential brand that believes in smart design and premium fabrics, okay? Mack Weldon likes design. They like to look nice. Simple shopping. You know how hard it is when you know what happened to me the last time I went to get underwear?
What?
I got a rubber bullet in my face, and I got tear gassed, and someone hit me with a brick, and one of the police horses fucking, went up and went nuts. Who wants that? Who needs it?
No one.
I'm just going to the mall, and people around me are looting, which is justifiable anger. Stop leaving your house. So I just went online and got Mack Weldon underwear, okay? They really value their loyal customers. That's why they've created the Weldon Blue loyalty program. Create an account. It's totally free. Place an order for any amount. Never pay shipping again. Once you've purchased $200 worth of products from Mack Weldon, not only will you continue to receive free shipping, but you will also start saving 20% on every order you make for the next year. Level 2 also grants you access to new products before they're released to anyone else, as well as free gifts added to future orders. How great is that? I like their mission statement. I like that they built a company that likes to make things simple, but not sacrifice any of the quality. Isn't that nice?
Love it.
Do you?
I love it.
It's a shame it's stunning you never booked any of those commercials you went out for. Remember those 2 years you went out for commercials?
I booked a Starbucks commercial.
What happened to it?
I don't know if it ever aired. Maybe
what did you do in it?
I played a guy's friend in it outside a taco stand.
What the fuck does that have to do with Starbucks?
He was holding a Starbucks cup and they were dollying out in the rain.
What was the point of the commercial? What were you, ICE agents? That's what Starbucks is. They don't want anybody wearing Black Lives Matter stuff. They don't want any of their suburban moms to get upset. So what was the commercial? You and somebody else were ICE agents trying to arrest a guy that owned a taco stand for Starbucks? Great. You should be ashamed of yourself. For 20% off your first order, visit MacWeldon.com and enter promo code TIM, T-I-M. Okay? MacWeldon.com, MacWeldon.com, promo code TIM, T-I-M. I'm telling you, it's worth it. You don't want to leave your home, you dummies. COVID is spiking. It's a goddamn pandemic out there. We got violent clashes, civil unrest, all the things that we were joking about 6 months ago have all come true. So stay home. Get your underwear to your house. It's much easier and better. It's MacWeldon.com, MacWeldon.com. Enter promo code TIM. Thank you. When you see the growth of something like non-binary, where people are identifying as queer, and they say, I'm identifying as non-binary, and many of them are white, middle-class college students that, this seems to be, and that's not all of them, but, at schools like Oberlin and Wesleyan and places like that, people are identifying as non-binary. How much of that, because to me, and I'm on Patreon, I don't have to, I can do whatever I want. A lot of it to me seems like an identity crisis that's not really rooted in any true gender dysphoria as much as it's rooted in a socio-political understanding of the world and a desire to be maybe in a protected or a desire to be in a group of people that's not seen as the oppressor. And how much of this is a phase, and how many of these people grow out of that non-binary distinction and then just live either regular heterosexual or homosexual lives?
I'm not sure that this has been studied, and I think that the phenomenon is probably too young or too new to have good data on that. But I agree with you. I find the concept of non-binariness incredibly regressive, because it presupposes that if you're not non-binary, if you're non-binary, then what am I? Does that make me binary? And it relies on these stereotypes, right? So if you talk to people and you say like, all right, and I've done this. I have a lot of friends who identify as non-binary and trans now, more actually every day, and not because I'm meeting new people. So, and I've had these conversations with my friends. So explain to me, like, what does it feel like to be non-binary? And they'll say, and I've used they as both the singular and the plural in this case. Well, sometimes when I wake up, I feel like a man, and sometimes I feel like a woman. All right, well, what does that mean? Or I feel like neither. What does that mean? Well, sometimes I want to wear masculine clothes, and sometimes I want to wear femme clothes. And so to me, that's just reinforcing stereotypes that I think both men and women would be better off rejecting. And so that's my problem with the idea of non-binary. I think it just reinforces this. It reinforces the binary in this like very sort of ironic twist. And I think, to be totally frank, I think it's very trendy. It is trendy. There's and I'm sure that lots of people would get mad at me for saying this, but it is undeniably trendy. And it's like identity is such a huge thing now. And like when I was a teenager, I don't think we ever talked about identity. We talked about sort of the clique that you were in and the style that you had. And I think there's a lot of overlap. Like, we had the goth kids and the alt kids and the jocks and the rednecks or whatever. And now you just like add another.
And now we have the non-binaries and the Nazis and the activists and the anarchists and,
Yeah. And the asexuals and the aromantics and the furries. And it's just this like, we just have more labels than I ever would have imagined.
You wrote an article about furries.
I did. I've written so many articles. I don't even remember doing this. I'm sure that I did at some point.
What is the furry community, and how are they helping Black Lives Matter?
The furry community. So furries can be a couple different things. The most interesting furries are the furries who dress up like stuffed animals and have sex with each other. That's not what I always say. in the suits, right? In their fursuits. So that's what I've always thought of as furries as. But there's also, it has gone from sort of a kink to an identity. And not all furries have sex in their suits. Not all furries are kinksters, and not all kinksters are furries. But what started out as a kink, I think, has become a much more of an identity that people take seriously. The great thing about furries is that they tend to have like anime avatars in their bios, or like cartoon drawings of themselves in their fursuits. So it's a really good signal of who not to take seriously.
Yeah, my friend Nick Mullen made a very interesting point once about a lot of the people that you see like identifying as non-binary. A lot of them, it's either not only anime avatars, but they're kind of like nerds. They seem to be over-invested in like these mythological worlds. I think that's why J.K. Rowling's treason hit them so hard.
Dude, I know. I have an ex-girlfriend who called me out when I wrote this detrans piece, like excommunicated me from her life. We were on good terms, but just like was done with me after I wrote this piece. And she has about 6 Harry Potter tattoos.
Yeah.
Obviously, like at this point, I can't ask her how she's feeling, but I just wonder how quickly she made the appointment to get all of her tattoos covered up.
Yeah. What do you think it is? What is the overlap there between nerds and people that have some type of sexual identity crisis? And I mean nerds, not like nerds like people that are coders, but I mean people that, whatever, play Magic the Gathering, like love these mythological worlds. Also, a lot of them, there seems to be an overlap with people that have sexual identity issues. If you could guess what that overlap would be or postulate what it might be, what do you think it is?
Okay, this is pure speculation. So I don't know if anybody has studied this. I have no like good data on this, just pure speculation. So I think there might be 2 things. And the first one I say with a little bit of hesitation because I feel like it could get me in trouble, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think the first connection is autism. So there's a really high, and this is not so much about furries or fantasy world, but
it's getting good. We're getting good. We're getting close to the meat. The meat is tender, closer to the bone. Keep going.
Okay, so there has been research on natal females, so what we typically think of as like teen girls who transition to either male or non-binary or whatever. So this population has spiked in recent years, and there's some overlap between natal females who the concept is called rapid onset gender dysphoria. So it's basically a population who doesn't have a pediatric history of gender dysphoria, but sort of spends a lot of time online and decides at some point that he or she or they are trans. And like surprisingly high percentage, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, and I don't know if anybody does actually, but there is some overlap with people on the autism spectrum disorder. So I think that might be part of it. People who maybe are more drawn to the online world, whose social skills or making human connections face-to-face isn't sort of their primary way of interacting with the world. And when you spend a lot of time in online communities, it's just like any other community. What's happening in the community rubs off on you. So, I mean, I think we're in the midst of a social contagion in terms of trans stuff. That's probably not something I would have said that if I still worked at The Stranger and had an editor who could yell at me for it. But I think anybody who's really been observing this would say that it's obvious.
What explains the rise in autism?
Oh, that I have no idea. Oh, well, I mean, I've done a little bit of research on this, and I think vaccines, obviously. But if not that, there's
is that true? Do you think that's true?
No,
okay.
No, I don't think that's true. No,
okay.
But I think diagnostics.
So you had my audience, and you just lost them.
You had
them, and then you just lost them. It's a fickle group. When you said trans people are autistic, they were like, they pressed subscribe on your Patreon, they pressed donate, and then when you said autism didn't come from vaccines, their finger went off the button. So you got to be very careful. But so if it's not vaccines, and I'm not saying it's vaccines, what do I know? I was vaccinated. I'm fine. What?
More or less.
What do you think it could be?
Oh, I think probably like better diagnostic tools. I mean, It's possible that people are. I did see. Okay, there's a book called by Johann Hari called I'm forgetting the name of it, but the latest book by Johann Hari, who's a journalist, wrote a book about the causes of the root causes of depression and anxiety, specifically depression. And if I ask like most people on the street what causes depression, what I think they're going to tell me is there's a chemical imbalance, right? And it turns out that that's not true, according to Hari. That really, that was like the idea that there's a serotonin imbalance in your head, and that's the reason you're depressed, is based on like a very small study in the 1960s that was never replicated. What he argues, and I'm not an expert on this, so I'm just like repeating his findings. So if anybody gets mad about this, yell at him instead of me. What he argues is that depression and anxiety are much more a response to living in a disconnected world. People are depressed because our lives are shitty, and it's actually a natural response. And there is evidence that SSRIs, things like Paxil or lorazepam or whatever, these drugs that are used to treat depression and anxiety, are mostly effective as placebos. And so I bring this up in the context of autism because there's one line in his book that I don't know if this is true. Please, like, this is just like anybody who's listening to this, research this yourself before you take this at face value. He says that there is some evidence that there may be a correlation between taking birth control and autism. I mean, I'm sorry, not taking birth control, about taking SSRIs and autism. So we've seen a spike in the uses of antidepressants at the same time that we've seen a spike in incidences of autism. I want to I am not an expert on this. So nobody consider what I'm saying.
I think what Katie is trying to say here is don't take the medicine, folks. You don't need it. My mother, who's a schizophrenic.
She probably needs it.
I mean, to be honest, the way the world's unfolding, I wonder if we're going to have to go apologize to my mother because everything she's saying is happening. She said there were people, listen, it's very interesting, right? When you talk about anxiety and depression, because a lot of people have this, again, as an identity. Like, I grew up with genuine mental illness. My mother was genuinely paranoid schizophrenic. She thought people were following her. She thought members of the family were stealing from her. She had nothing to take. She had Beanie Babies. She thought she said at Christmas dinner once, Elvis might have been her father, or her father might have been a big celebrity.
I could see that.
Yeah,
I could see that. I mean, you got. If you flipped your hair back, you could be. How are your hip gyrations?
Yeah, they're not bad. They're not great. Yeah. But so I was very skeptical of what when I looked out and I saw people that were diagnosing themselves with anxiety off Instagram. Like they were, so it seems like the rise in these, not to say that these things don't exist, but like, again, it feels very tied to the need to have an identity and a way to put yourself in a box and say, hey, I suffer from this. I suffer, a lot of men in comedy, straight white men in comedy have to go out now and say they're anxious or they're depressed. I struggle with depression. I'm anxious, even though I'm white. I'm anxious. I go through things too. So it is interesting to talk about that. And of course, now these pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars marketing solutions to these problems.
Right. I do think anxiety and depression are real, but I think that the cause might not be what we have always assumed the cause to be, these chemical imbalances. And that's where I've sort of hung up. And I do think you're onto something about, your pathology becoming your identity. And also seems undeniable that victimhood and culture is sort of very in right now.
The cause could also be poor diet, right? I mean, we eat white sugar.
Or, I mean, things like my least favorite thing to do in the world is exercise. I know that if I exercise, I would be less anxious and less depressed, but that's hard. It is hard to get up and like move your body and sweat, and it's not fun and it doesn't feel good. So what is easier? Going out and doing these things that actually will make you feel better about the world, or taking a pill? I can totally see the appeal of taking the pill. It's just easier. But I mean, there's also lots of evidence that the pills are mostly effective as placebos and they don't work long term. People have to continue upping the dosage of their medication all the time. And there are really serious side effects, which is the problem. If you were just taking a sugar pill and it relieved your depression and anxiety, it wouldn't have any side effects. But if you're taking something that, makes your boobs grow bigger or smaller, or makes you go bald, or makes your balls shrink, or whatever, whatever it is, well, that's a problem. But I do think people are genuinely anxious and depressed because we live in a world that is actually safer in some respects than it's ever been, 2020 aside. But we still live in these ways that are pretty unnatural for humans, especially in the midst of a pandemic. Like, how many people have been stuck in their apartments alone for 3 months, and then now you can go out and protest? So that's like your get out of apartment free card. But humans aren't meant to live like this, and it makes us kind of crazy. And we're also not meant to spend all of our time staring at fucking screens all day.
No, we're not. What do you think? What's happened in academia and the type of ideas that have thrived in the academic space for more than a decade, but certainly have become really contentious in the last decade, are now bleeding out into the media. You're seeing it at the New York Times, where the editor, James Bennett, the editorial editor, whatever, resigned because they published an article by Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton, with a position which was, if the cops can't contain the chaos, you got to bring in the military. At the time they published the article, I think that in polls had support of 58% of people were supporting Tom Cotton's position. They ran it in the New York Times. There's been essentially like a coup. You see it's happening, and James Bennett resigned. There are other newsrooms. Reportedly, Andrew Sullivan, gay writer at The New Yorker, cannot publish an article.
Andrew's at New York Magazine.
New York Magazine. He cannot publish an article about the riots, and every article that he does publish has to be vetted a bunch of times to make sure that it doesn't, trigger people. So a lot of these ideas that were confined to classrooms and confined to the universities have now bled out into the media, and people are saying, it's a matter of time before they enter the government or they enter the court system. What are these ideas? How would you, because they've been called a lot of things, right? Jordan Peterson has said it's post-modernism. A lot of people said it's neo-Marxism. Some people say it's the excesses of political correctness. How would you qualify these ideas, and why is their spread seemingly, why are they now so popular? And why don't more people recognize that these ideas inherently lead to a more divisive society with more violence than the one that we have now, which is what I see. I see that when I read the way that people want people to interact, and the amount of stresses you're putting on people in these social situations that are of different races and different genders, the attack on humor, which is huge, which is and by the way, nobody in the Ivy League realizes this because they've never had a shitty job. When you work a shitty low-wage minimum wage job, the jokes that you do to each other are race jokes. They're base level humor that makes people laugh, because the only things you guys have in common and the only things that you can really isolate about each other are characteristics. So if you're fat, or if you're gay, I haven't been either of those two things. But if you are Irish, I've suffered for that. So people end up, and in the Ivy League or in the tech, companies or places like that, they've never worked a shitty job where everyone's kind of miserable and you're blowing off steam. So I just look at the way that they want to configure the world, and I say this leads to more alienation, more isolation, and ultimately more violence.
I think you're right. There is a lot of argument about what to call this moment or the genesis of this moment. I mean, as you mentioned, a lot of this comes from academia and these sort of postmodern critical race studies, theory studies, theories. Lots of things that cannot be proved; they can only be postulated. And you have seen this really break down in the past, or break out into the mainstream over the past couple of weeks since the murder of George Floyd, which has frankly been a little bit refreshing to see, because I've been talking and bitching and warning people about the excesses of the social justice left and what's happening in colleges for years. And people have said things like, it's just, it's campus, it's college kids being college kids demanding trigger warnings, trying to deplatform speakers, basically rejecting all notions of free speech and free expression and diversity of thought. Just this narrowing of liberal values. And I don't mean liberal as in democratic, but sort of Enlightenment values. And we've been seeing this. Those of us who've been paying attention have been seeing this for years. And now it has broken open into the mainstream, which is in some ways a relief. And I think you're right. This something that started in academia has really spread out, and it's everywhere in media. There, as you mentioned, James Bennett got forced to essentially step down from the New York Times for basically publishing a problematic op-ed by a sitting U.S. senator. There have been firings over the past couple weeks or the past week or so at Bon Appetit, Refinery 29, the Philadelphia Inquirer. A journalist at the CBC was fired for saying the N-word she was quoting somebody. She was, it's the same thing that happened to Papa John last year, where you can't say this word even to quote somebody. The CEO of Second City stepped down, CrossFit. There's been lots and lots of these firings. I think probably the most egregious one was a guy named David Shore, who tweeted an article. It was not an article. It was a study that had been conducted by a black man that looked at public perception of violent versus nonviolent protests in the 1960s. And what he found is that violent protests tended to make voters drift to the right. Nonviolent protests increased Democratic turnout. And so this basically analyst tweeted this out, and there's a massive outcry, a study by a black man. So he tweets this out, there's a massive outcry, and he got fired from his job, right? And so this is going to continue happening. Someone in my DMs referred to what's happening right now as Me Too for microaggressions. And I think that's a very apt way of putting it. And one of the parallels is that you're seeing these purges in the same industries that affected the Me Too, that were affected during Me Too. So media, tech, academia, these sort of elite institutions, mostly dominated by upper middle class and wealthy people. Where you're not seeing it as much, and where I don't think you're going to see it as much, is in the working class, right? So the places where you're actually more likely to be, to experience actual racism, not microaggressions, but actual overt racism, or overt sexual harassment. And this is not to minimize the experiences that people have gone through at sort of the upper echelon of American culture. But, I worked in cafes, I worked at restaurants, I was a dishwasher. Like, that is actually where you get sexually harassed. And that is actually where you hear like overtly racist comments. And I do not think you're going to be seeing these purges in that sort of class, in sort of the underclass. And I also don't think the underclass will benefit and as much as sort of the upper classes will from this, or at least some people will benefit.
How much of this do you think is the excesses of the kind of gangster capitalism that we have now, where you have lots of wealthy institutions and corporations avoiding taxes and essentially creating a parallel world for themselves to live in? They are now using the language of social justice to communicate their commitment to changing the world, but largely it's aesthetic, and that they're still running out the back door with a bag of money.
Right. There's a lot of irony in seeing somebody like Jeff Bezos lauded as a hero for making a pro Black Lives Matter statement, when if Jeff Bezos actually gives a shit about Black lives, he could make sure that his Black employees get bathroom breaks at his fulfillment centers or healthcare. Same thing with companies like Uber and Lyft and all of these tech company, or the NFL, any of these companies that have, come out and made their statement. But it also, right now, the pressure to conform is so high that it is not surprising to me at all that brands are jumping on this. For one, not doing it would be terrible PR. There's been a list circulating among, like in the LA theater scene, like a crowdsourced list that notes which theater companies or whatever people in this field haven't come out and made a pro Black Lives Matter statement. And so if you're worried about cancellation...
The LA theater scene's always been a little weak. It's always been a New York. It's been a New York thing.
Yeah.
The LA theater scene. Come on.
Yeah, so maybe that's their issue is not feeling up to the New York theater scene.
What is the ruling class, other than the paying the lip service? What are they... Are there people right now sitting in the smoke-filled rooms going, this is good for us, keep them divided, let's feed the flames? Are they like, hey, let's figure out a way? I'm talking about the people that are at Davos, the people that go to the Bilderberg Group, the people that own these media companies that are, government intelligence, national security apparatus, call them deep state, call them whatever, permanent political class of people, largely unelected, there because they have a lot of money. What are they doing? What are they going to try to do? Are they going to try to wield this anger that you see right now?
I have to admit I don't have any connections in the deep state, so I'm not sure I'd be able to really answer that question. But
historically how many of these protest groups have been co-opted by the FBI. I mean, look at COINTELPRO. Right. I mean, look at all of these things, right?
Right.
I mean, we know that a lot of times things are pushed in, and maybe we don't even need, the infiltration anymore because people are just ready to push things further than they should go by themselves. But you have a lot of billionaires in this country. You have a lot of wealth and you have a lot of people. What are they, if you could speculate, what do you think they are feeling at this precise moment? Are they seeing things come? Are the wheels coming off, or are they not coming off? And are we all overreacting because we're paying such hyper close attention to all this?
I think there are a couple of different issues here. I mean, what are they feeling? I bet some of them are feeling a lot of white guilt. If they are anything like the people who I'm following in my social media feeds and the friends that I'm talking to, a lot of white guilt probably. Will that actually change anything? Like Jeff Bezos feels some white guilt. Is he actually going to change the policies about Amazon? I don't think so. I don't think that he will. I think that the reason that companies and brands are engaging this is because to be perceived as racist will kill your brand. I have no idea what the people pulling the strings at Davos or behind the scenes think of any of this. I mean, you make it sound like they're, sort of, they've got devil horns sticking out of their heads, and I don't know that that's true. It sounds a little conspiratorial to me.
But
you could totally be right.
You said devil horns. I didn't say devil horns. What I'm saying is that what I've read about the fine folks at these places, the ones that frequented Little St. James, the ones that cut the sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein, the people that, get us into wars all over the place that we need not be in. I'm a little skeptical. I'm curious as to what they think about this. That's all. I'm not saying they all have devil horns, but I'm saying they have entrenched interests.
Right.
And you wonder in a period of chaos like this, what they feel. I wonder if they've soured on Trump. I wonder if, because they're not a monolith, by the way. I mean,
right.
Nobody that's read about this stuff that's sane thinks that these people are monolith, but they do exist. I mean, the reality is these things are real. Obamagate is real. Brennan and Clapper, these people are real. They have interests. They have the capability to do lots of things behind the scenes. And do you, and this is a question for you as a journalist, do you ignore that dimension of power completely? Do you feel that dimension of power is just a fantasy of yahoos on Twitter? You don't give any credence to the idea that there are very wealthy, very powerful people that operate behind the scenes?
No, I think that's probably likely true.
Yeah.
It's not something that I follow, and probably because, I'm not an investigative journalist in that particular way.
You've got enough problem. I mean, you're being canceled at coffee houses. The last thing you need is the CIA hijacking your car.
Right.
I mean,
what I'm more worried about is, so I'm worried about a couple things. I'm worried that the protests now are going to lead to a backlash in which Donald Trump gets elected. And I'm worried about that, not because I don't think I think Trump derangement syndrome is real. I don't think I personally suffer for it, but I do think Orange Man is bad. And not because and I actually think that the president has too much power. So if you have a total bungling idiot in the White House and he isn't actually able to get anything done, I'm okay with that.
I mean, he just told a black news anchor on Fox that Lincoln may not. Did you see that? The clip where he goes, what Lincoln did was mixed, freeing the slaves. He goes, you don't really know. And then the black anchor on Fox News had to go, well, we're free. And he goes, yes, you're free. No, I mean, it's the president of the United States. He's also doing a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This the scene of a massacre of black people. I mean, he's doing it on Juneteenth. Are all of these things, I mean, I don't know. I mean, is this guy a white supremacist?
I think it's red meat. I think he's just trying to rile up his base. I think he's trying to capitalize on what's happening now. And from not even never Trumpers, but Republicans who have been more supportive of Trump, they have criticized them. The sort of intellectual Republicans have criticized his handling of this crisis and the pandemic. They have criticized him. I don't know that they represent the base. And Trump needs his base to come out, and he doesn't need them to come out everywhere, but he needs them to come out in a few select districts and a few select states to win, because of our electoral college, to win just a few states, and he'll have the election. And I'm very terrified that the backlash is going to lead to that. That said, I'm also scared, and not equally scared, but I am also concerned, let's say, that if Joe Biden wins, Joe Biden is not woke, right? And Joe Biden, he's old as shit. All of his his gaffes and his missteps, I sort of like them because what they show me is that he is unintentionally not politically correct. But I think right now the pressure to appoint people to his cabinet who are representative of these sort of illiberal liberals, I think we're going to see that. And so my concern is that Biden gets elected and he appoints Robin DiAngelo to lead the new Department of Reparations or something like that. Hopefully he wouldn't appoint a white woman to do that. But these sort of critical theorists that we were just talking about, I am worried about that being entrenched in government. And you're already seeing this in education. So education systems, specifically in cities like New York and in Seattle, I'm sure this is happening in San Francisco, probably LA, sort of the big metro areas, but all over the world, they teach this critical race theory that is basically, it's essentialist in nature. And it focuses everything on race, right? And I don't actually think that that's good for the republic. I think the more you focus on race, the more you're going to have resentful white people responding to that in a negative way, because people don't like to feel guilty because of their race. They just don't. And so I'm concerned about Biden getting into the office and appointing a bunch of university cuckoos who are then going to be dictating policy. Like Elizabeth Warren. Do you remember, did you watch the LGBTQ town hall last year?
I'm ashamed to say I did not.
Oh, well, you really missed out. It was only about 9 hours long. And there was a lot of like crazy rhetoric. Like at one point, there was a lot of like outbursts and protests, which was sort of funny because mostly it was happening during Mayor Pete, the one gay guy.
Right.
They did not like him. So these politicians, like at one point, and you probably heard this, Elizabeth Warren said that if she is elected, she would appoint, or she would allow a 9-year-old trans kid named Jacob, who was in the audience, to vet the next Secretary of Education. And maybe that was just rhetoric. I think it's like utter insanity. For one thing, it's a campaign ad for Donald Trump, but it's also just stupid on its face, right? We don't let children dictate who's going to be the next Secretary of Education. I don't care how trans they are or how cute they are. We just don't do that. So that's my fear, is that this current moment is going to force Biden to adopt some of the identitarian, the like far left identitarian policies that some of his opponents, like Warren and Castro and Booker and Harris, basically everyone else, even Marianne Williamson, were advocating for, that I don't think Biden really believes in, but just the pressure has built, the momentum has built. And even if it doesn't reflect the dominant perspective of the American voter, what it does reflect is a dominant perspective of the media, Twitter, the loudest, most powerful voices.
What is the end game for the critical race theorists, the people that push this narrative? What is their end game? What would they like society to look like if they had their way?
I think they want power. I think that's the end game. And this makes it sound more sort of duplicitous than I think it really is. I think a lot of these people are true believers. They're anti-racist, and anti-racist is not mean, not racist. It's a actual set of values that are sort of very essential in nature. That whiteness is something that needs to be overcome.
What is whiteness? Somebody explain to me. I don't know what that is.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea.
Right.
I mean, it's more than just your ethnicity. It's this I guess this thing inside of all of us. Maybe it's like a soul that it's connected to white supremacy, the original sin. All of this rhetoric is incredibly religious, right? But the difference between, I think, what's happening now, sort of great awakening, and actual religion is that most religions have some mechanism for reform or reconciliation or grace, and this doesn't exist in this current dogma. So I've never taken a class in whiteness studies. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I'll go back to school and become a diversity trainer if my podcast doesn't work out.
I've never told you this, but when I was a young boy, I loved cereal. Mm-hmm. And my best friend was a kid named Paul. Okay? Why are you laughing?
Because it seems like you're making this up.
No, it's not what's happening right now. Okay. I'm sharing something that's very deep and personal to me, and that's why it's taking me a little bit to get it out. But I think you assuming that it just shows the type of person you are. Okay? What did I say his name was?
I think Paul.
Paul was my best friend that I've ever had. He was a good kid, and he believed in the same values and ideals that I believed in. Freedom, democracy, the markets. And Paul had a tough home life. It was a hard life. It was not easy. You know? His parents had a rough marriage, and they were fond of the bottle. And they liked to drink. They liked to throw a few back. And then they would mercilessly beat him. And that was tough for him. But there were good times. You know? There were good times. Do you know what he loved?
What?
He loved cereal. He loved cereal. He would come over to my house, black and blue and bleeding, and I would say, hey, let's have a bowl of Lucky Charms. And he would love it. I mean, it would take his mind off the beatings.
Sure.
I mean, they used to go at him. I mean, I went to call for him. You know, you go call for somebody, like when you have friends, you go, can I call for my friend? You know, Your parents go, yeah. And then you go knock at their door, hey, can Paul play? I mean, one time I went and they both had hockey sticks out, and in the backyard, they were just going at him. I thought he was dead because he was no longer moving, and they were just hitting him with the hockey sticks. And they were making a game out of it. They were weird people. They were fun, you know, not without they were characters, but they were just, you know, hitting what appeared to be his lifeless body with hockey sticks in the backyard. I don't even know where they got the sticks, if they even played hockey. It was a horrible thing to see. It was a horrible thing to see. Now, when they saw me, they looked at me and they didn't stop. That was even weirder. They saw me, and then they just kept beating him and hitting him with sticks. And I said, whoa. And I went up to him. Eventually, they stopped. And I went up to him, and I carried him. I carried him, you know, like Christ when he went off the cross. I carried him back to my house, and I nursed him back to life with Lucky Charms. Now, he's dead now. His parents cooked him and ate him. Now, that is neither here nor there. Because if he was alive today, he would want to eat Lucky Charms because they reminded him of the good times in his childhood, of which there were admittedly few. Mm-hmm. But he wouldn't want the sugars. He wouldn't want it. He kept himself good. So he would get Magic Spoon, which is a new cereal company that's discovered a way to recreate your favorite childhood cereals with 0 sugar, 12 grams of protein, and only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving. It tastes too good to be true. With Magic Spoon, you can indulge in an array of classic flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and blueberry. Fruity is the best one. It tastes like Fruit Loops. But get a variety pack. Taste all 4. See what's good for you. Magic Spoon spent over a year working with the best food scientists and chefs in the world. One time they put his head in a fish tank. And I didn't even understand it, but they put his head in a fish tank, and they had turned him upside down. They were like giving him a swirly in the fish tank. And they were doing it so hard, they broke the glass and everything. It was like, what did he do to deserve that? You know what I mean? But no matter what they did, time after time, the biggest smile, he had no teeth once, and I had to grind up the Lucky Charms and feed them to him like a paste. But he loved cereal. If that dog does not go to fucking bed, I'm watching my friend's dog right now. I'm going to kill him. My friend is a fucking... Dude, he fucking snowballed me, dude, and I will never take this dog again. Yeah. This dog is a literal terrorist. And my friend and his wife are flying to Tahoe for the weekend, and I took their dog, which they lied, said it's like a well-trained dog. It's absolutely not trained. And I hope their plane crashes, by the way.
Did it just get out through your door?
I don't think so. Maybe it's giving up. MagicSpoon.com/Tim Dillon, grabbing a variety pack. It's MagicSpoon.com/Tim Dillon. You got to grab a variety pack, okay? Use the code Tim Dillon for free shipping. One time at Christmas, they gave him a Christmas present, and he opened it up, and they had both shit in a box, and they made him eat it, and he almost died from eating their shit. So again... you know. And you know what's crazy? They weren't the worst parents. MagicSpoon.com/Tim Dillon. Grab a variety pack. Do it for me and do it for my dead friend who loves cereal, whose parents beat him to death, cooked him, and ate him. Never got charged. Are still free. Claim he ran away. We know better. MagicSpoon.com/Tim Dillon. Free shipping. Thank you. The Tim Dillon Show is brought to you by the Weed Whacker from Manscaped. I used this the other day. Listen up, fellas, because we have a new Manscaped product alert. Manscaped just released the Weed Whacker nose and ear hair trimmer. Take a look in the mirror, and I use a regular one for your dick, but the other one is good too. Take a look in the mirror, and I guarantee you'll see hairs sticking out of your face holes. That's because, of course, with the quarantine and everything else. Nose hair is gross. Nobody likes it. Got to get rid of that nose hair so the cocaine goes up smooth. The Weed Whacker uses skin-safe technology, which helps prevent nicks and snags. Let's change nicks right now, please. Just say snags. Who's writing this? Trying to get me in trouble? It's got 9,000 RPM motor powered, 360-degree rotary dual blade system. Its intelligently contoured design enhances the trimming experience. Manscaped is the best. It's waterproof. Use it in the shower for easy use and cleaning. The only nose hair trimmer on the market with a powerful and rechargeable lithium-ion battery that lasts for up to 90 minutes of use. Have you ever pulled your nose hair out with your fingers? This might hurt worse than nicking your balls. Manscaped is making whacking your weeds a time to look forward to, delivering maximum confidence while providing hygiene. Yes, you will get a replaceable blade every 3 months to keep your weed whacking time clean and enjoyable. 79% of partners polled admitted that long nose hair is a major turnoff. Who are those other 21%? Those are the ladies you need. A woman's like, I actually prefer nose hair. And she goes, I also like to get punched in the face. She goes, there's something masculine about a guy that has nose hair and doesn't let me run my mouth, if you know what I mean. I like a man with nose hair who grabs me by the back of the hair and says, how about you shut the fuck up? My last boyfriend had nose hair. You know what he also had? Big hands. And when I would act up, he'd put them on me and calm me down. There's nothing like getting smacked in a crowded Macy's. Look, fellas. Oh, I did that one. It's time to upgrade your Manscaped routine with the Weed Whacker. I like Manscaped. I use the other one, and the Weed Whacker is good too. Get 20% off. Free shipping with the code TIMWEED at manscaped.com. TIMWEED. If you need a nose hair trimmer, this is it, and you do. Also, get the dick thing too. That's great too. The Manscaped is great. You do not nick. I used it the other day. You don't nick your, it's great. And especially if you're a fat person, you don't even know what you're shaving down there. You just have to just shave something. So the other ones, you just end up bloody and it's bad. But Manscaped, you can shave. It's all good. 20% off with free shipping. Manscaped.com. Use the code TIMWEED. What are you waiting for? Go whack your weeds. How do you see this as a way? What is your feeling about the people that say we're trying to end capitalism? What is what is that, in terms of, people are, there's obviously all of the contradictions you have to breeze past. You're tweeting that from an iPhone, you're tweeting that in a Starbucks or whatever it is. But, most people realize that the present form of capitalism is unsustainable.
Right.
So how serious are these people? They talk about reforming it, and are they the people to reform it? And how do you reform it, with more than slogans?
My perspective on this has changed in recent years. I probably would have called myself a socialist 5 or 6 years ago. But what I've realized is that the version of socialism that we think of as like the ideal socialism, so like Northern European democratic socialism, right? It's socialism, sure, like there's high taxes, people are taken care of, there's a welfare state. But then there's the other kind of socialism, like Marxism, communism, sort of socialism adjacent, in which the state controls the means of production, right? The state controls the businesses, and I see nothing in America's recent history that shows to me that the state would be better at maintaining and producing goods and having functional companies than free market capitalists are. So I've changed my mind about this a little bit. I find myself much more sympathetic to free market values than I did before. That said, you're right. I mean, capitalism, as we know it, is deeply flawed. But to me, I think what you could do is, regulate capitalism a little better. Things like, to me, I care deeply about the environment. I care more about the planet and the people in some respects. And so, stricter controls on things like emissions. There are arguments to be made that all people and companies respond better to incentives than they do penalties. And I think that is something that should be explored. But I think socialism, for a lot of people, especially young people, it's just become a sort of a signifier, right? So you put like a little rose emoji in your Twitter bio, and now you're a socialist. And what you want is you want free healthcare, which I think we should have a single payer healthcare system. I don't know that we should totally dismantle the private healthcare system before we do that. They want free education. Lots of them have student loans. They want free shit, essentially, which I want free shit too. I sympathize with that. But I don't know how much they have thought about, Donald Trump is our president. The federal government and state governments have shown over and over again that they are unable to manage industry as well as the free market is. Just things like ventilators, or like in Washington State where I live, we have this unemployment system. It's antiquated, difficult to use. An ex-colleague of mine just got his first unemployment check. He's been unemployed for 3 months, just got his first unemployment check this week. The system isn't functional, and it's these government systems that aren't working. And
I think when people talk about capitalism, one of the major issues that I have with it is this parallel world where wealthy people can evade taxes, and they can. And this happens all over the world. It's not it's supranational in nature, the way that this system functions, where you can just take money and dump it into real estate in cities without, putting your name on it. You do it through a shell corporation. It drives up the cost of real estate in these cities like New York and London. It prices everybody else out. Right. People like their home. They like where they grew up. These areas have histories, and the relationships that people have to these places are deep and complex. So when you just allow a group of billionaires from all over the world turn these cities into money laundering schemes, it fills people with the type of anxiety that then gets redirected in a very unhealthy place, whereas it's race resentment or it's paranoia or it's conspiracy mongering. And I think a lot of that starts with people seeing places they loved kind of be taken over and being used for, international criminals, really, to stash money. And that's one example of the system. But the other example of the system is the amount of money and its impact on our political system is absurd. I mean,
it is, but all right, let's think about how effective that is, right? I mean, obviously, when you have things like, massive corporations donating to senators or whatever, we need to be concerned about how this is impacting their votes. But you have someone like Michael Bloomberg, right? How many billions of dollars did he spend on his campaign? He fucking lost. The Koch brothers, essentially sat out 2016. Yeah. Right. And so I'm not Joe Biden spent almost.
Did the Koch brothers sit out 2016? Didn't they have a war chest of $80 million that Jane Mayer wrote about?
I don't think they supported Donald Trump.
They didn't support the president, but they went to local elections and things like that.
Right.
So
when it comes to at least the presidential race, I'm not convinced that these massive infusions of cash, whether it's Bernie Sanders style $5 at a time, or it's Michael Bloomberg spending his own fortune, or if it's big money PACs.
The president may not matter as much as the ability to manipulate things on a local, even state level.
Sure.
So I think that that concerns people like me, where I'm not a Marxist and I don't believe that the government's going to be good at producing goods. But I'm saying if you don't regulate people, and none of it has to do with America. This is my other thing with capitalism. Like, we've married the capitalism in America so closely together. It's like, this is the way we do it. But how many of these people don't give a fuck when a city like Detroit collapses? How many of these people don't care that the Rust Belt of America is been hollowed out and they're dealing now with an opioid addiction? How many of these people care about the south side of Chicago and the shootings that are happening there? Or do these people maintain residences all over the world and their loyalty is to an economic architecture more so than an actual country? That to me seems unsustainable, because I don't want to live in a technocratic surveillance state, which is, I think, what these people want. I think they want to treat people, they want to strip people of rights, surveil them, and then they're going to have all the best real estate. You know, you drive up the California coast, all of the prime real estate is owned, all of the good real estate. If you like the environment, you know, go to, the Puget Sound to tell me how much of that has been taken over by insanely wealthy, powerful people.
But you also have to, I mean, you do have a point. I mean, in places like Vancouver, BC was for a while the most expensive city in North Carolina. I go on this show from Marxist to fascist multiple times throughout the episode, because what we do is we got to maximize it. And if you want to do well at this, you and who's it, Jesse Pinkman, who you're writing with. But the point is, if you want to do well with it, you got to honestly, you got to give them a right, then you give them a left. Because everyone that listens wants, all of my audience wants the guillotine. Who goes in the guillotine? It depends. Okay, well, I don't think anybody should go in the guillotine.
Well, enjoy the poorhouse. Keep going.
Okay, but there's also, so I think you're right about this. I mean, foreign speculation is a big deal on local markets. I mean, in Seattle, they've tried to cut down on foreign buyers buying essentially second and third condos, because you end up with cities where, basically you have these, multi-million-dollar high rises per unit and nobody living in them, right? It's money marking. But one of the reasons there's a housing crisis in the United States is because it's just a supply and demand issue, right? So there's just not enough housing. Well, why would developers want to build cheap single family homes when they can build these massive sky rises or whatever? It's just more expensive places. So I think you're right. I mean, is regulation the better way to get there, or are market incentives the best way to get there? I mean, to me, that's the question between socialism and capitalism.
Aren't we giving tax abatements to luxury condo developers? Aren't we giving... I mean, that's, I mean, so
for sure.
We're incentivizing that activity.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you have things like, just like the insane tax breaks that they get. That's like a company like Foxconn will get to go to a place like Wisconsin and bring in 500 jobs or whatever. And like I live in a city with, I don't know how many billionaires live in Seattle. I mean, there's a fucking ton of them. And we don't have an income tax in the state. It is unconstitutional to have an income tax in the state, which is exactly why Amazon and this is why they live here. Jeff Bezos initially wanted to house Amazon on a Native American reservation because the tax law, they have even more relaxed tax laws on reservations than they do in places like Seattle, which have just like incredibly regressive. But that's the thing. Like last year, there was a huge debate in Seattle about instituting a head tax, right? So we have incredibly high property taxes and incredibly high sales tax, and we'll have levies all the time because this is like an incredibly wealthy city and there's no income tax anywhere in the state and no capital gains tax, which is it's in the Constitution, right? You have to amend the Constitution to change this. So the city has tried to do little kind of workarounds. So they were going to institute what's called a head tax or a per employee tax on businesses, and so Amazon was so opposed to this that Jeff Bezos just was like, I'm not going to build another tower. They were in the midst of building a tower. We're just not going to build this tower. We're going to move. He was going to take his ball and go home, which he can do. I mean, he did the same thing in New York when AOC basically extorted him into, or she attempted to extort him and basically decided not to house this, Amazon 2 headquarters in her district. And so there's this really funny image. So Seattle has a socialist city council member named Shama Sawant. And there's this video I saw.
What?
Her name's Shama Sawant. She's Indian. She's Indian American.
I thought you said Shamus One, like their last name was One, like
almost. She is the one. She thinks that she's the one for sure. You will see her oftentimes on like cable news shows screaming loudly. So Shama Sawant, there's this great video of her. She's the real proponent of this head tax, and she wants Amazon out of the city. So she honestly couldn't give a fuck if if Jeff Bezos decides like we're leaving Seattle. She wants Amazon. She doesn't care. She wants them out. She wants a socialist reformation. So there's a great video of her standing in front of what's called Bezos balls, which are these two big glass structures that he built in the middle of Seattle. And so she's standing there and she's screaming like workers' rights or what, I can't remember what the slogan is, but something about like an Amazon had taxed for like to provide, they were going to use the money to deal with the homelessness crisis. So something about like helping the poor, helping the working class. And then behind her, there's a couple dozen dudes in like construction uniforms, like hard hats, and they're like high visibility vests chanting no Amazon head tax. So so the problem is that these socialists, especially this particular socialist, proclaims to stand for the working class, while the working class itself is basically like, fuck you. And that's part of identity politics, right? And I think one of the problems we're seeing now is, as you mentioned, there's been this divorce. Everybody's focused on their sort of on their racial group, their sex, their gender, their whatever they identify as. And there's much less cohesion among the working class. Whereas if you wanted to have an actual movement to raise the minimum wage or to improve conditions for workers or address income inequality, it would be, I think, much more effective to coalesce among the working class, and it would just splinter into these separate groups based on this color of our skin, which I think is what Bernie Sanders was trying to do. I wasn't a Sanders supporter because I thought he was going to get just trumped by Donald Trump. But I think that was his. Who
did you think had the best chance against Trump? Because Sanders, I thought Sanders said a lot of good things about unions and workers and the rights of people, to have health care and to have, early childhood education and like a lot of things that would have been positive overall for our society if he could get them done.
So I really flipped back and forth on this. I thought Sanders for a while because of the momentum that he had after 2018 and all of this popular support, particularly among bringing out the youth vote. But he just didn't. He got fewer votes in this primary than he did, in 2012.
That was amazing. The amazing thing is that the Sanders, like groundswell support, which wasn't there.
Well, I think part of that is because of Elizabeth Warren,
right.
Because she split the vote, right?
Yeah.
And Warren, I had been a big Warren fan, and then she turned away from being like the champion of the consumer and the little man and the person talking about corruption and in government, which is what you're talking about.
Right.
Talking about like the quote unquote epidemic of murder of trans women, which doesn't exist, and just this hyper focus on identity
now, go
politics.
Into that. The trans women epidemic of murder doesn't exist. Katie Herzog, autism is the reason people are trans. Go into this because you said this to me the other day.
I'm gonna get in so much trouble.
No,
man.
you're not. You're gonna get fucking famous.
All right. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Can you change your background to Charlottesville? I'm kidding, Katie. Tell us about.
You can't see the cross burning behind my head right now?
If I haven't seen a lesbian apartment, this is the most Seattle apartment. Everything's gray.
It's not an apartment, man. I live in a house. I'm a homeowner.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Come and do it in LA. Come and do it in LA and really impress me.
Well, I moved to the suburbs so I could get away from all this shit. So
I know.
I'm a suburban homeowner.
Because all we hear is that trans women are being murdered, and nobody wants that. And we hear it, and we hear trans women of color are being murdered. You say no. What say you?
I mean, okay, so what you hear about is the quote unquote epidemic of trans violence or epidemic of trans murder. So if you look at the statistics, and the statistic I'm about to tell you comes from the Human Rights Campaign. So this is like the primary gay and trans rights group in the United States. And up until recently, they were considered far too regressive on trans issues, but they have since shifted from being a gay rights group to, I think, primarily a trans rights or trans advocacy group. So this is from HRC. HRC says that in 2019, 25 trans people were murdered, right? So 25 of anything, like just on its face, it's just incredible to me that people continue to call this an epidemic, because 25 of anything isn't an epidemic, right? So I ran the numbers, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it turns out that when you look at murder rates, and this is a little bit difficult to do because we don't really know the population of trans people in the United States is probably underestimated. But so using like the most current data, what I found and what other people have found as well is that the murder rate for trans women or trans people is slightly lower than that for natal females and vastly lower than that for natal males. And it is true that that Black trans women are much more likely to be the victims of murder than like a white trans dude in Seattle, just vastly more likely. But when you drill into the actual cases, these particular cases, what you find is that the vast majority of these people who were killed in 2019 and 2018 and 2017 and every other year were not killed in bias crimes. They were killed doing sex work. They were killed through domestic violence, random bad luck. There were a couple bias crimes last year, and it's all terrible. People shouldn't be killed. Like, let's just acknowledge that. But this isn't an epidemic. It's actually not even disproportionately high. It is higher for sure for Black trans women, particularly Black trans women who are sex workers. But transphobia doesn't appear to be the actual root of these killings. And to me, if you care about trans lives and you want trans people to have healthy, happy lives where they are not victimized, you need to get at the root of the issue. And if the root isn't transphobia, then you need to stop repeating this slogan, that transphobia is killing people or whatever, because it's just not true. And so the other statistic that gets floated around all the time, this has been back in the news this week.
Is the argument that they're more likely to end up in sex work because they're trans and they're discriminated against at other jobs?
Well, yeah, I think that's probably part of the argument, and there are certainly socioeconomic factors at play here. If you're Black, you're more likely to be poor. If you're poor, you're more likely to be doing sex work. This is real intersectionality. There are these interlocking, characteristics dependent on these populations. But so this other statistic is even crazier, and that's that the life expectancy of trans women is 35. And sometimes they say no, it's the life expectancy of Black trans women or trans women of color. But you see this repeated all the time. Trans women on average only live to be 35 years old. So I looked into this last year, and that number comes out from almost nowhere. So there is a human rights organization based in South America, and they polled different LGBTQ advocacy groups, and they asked them They basically got data on rates of victimization, and what they found that in very specific populations, sex workers in Brazilian favelas, or however you pronounce that word, the average age, so the average age of a murder victim, of a trans murder victim, and actually not even average. So in this particular population, so 80% of trans murder victims in this population were under the age of 35, which is not actually uncommon. I mean, most people who are murdered are young, but this has nothing to do with the United States. This is extrapolated from some of the most dangerous areas in the world, doing the most dangerous job in the world. So it has nothing to do with your average trans person in the United States. And also, a lot of trans people don't come out until they're well after the age of 35 years old, right? So it just, on its face, it just doesn't make any sense, but people continue to repeat it. And I think this is really bad because it harms trans people, right? I mean, what do you think it would be like to wake up every day and think I'm never going to live to see my 36th birthday. I'll never be able to be president because trans women only live to be 35 years old. It's just not true. And it just gets repeated. And that's what drives me crazy about the media. So what happens is a study will get published, or some advocacy group will commission a study, and then they'll issue a press release. And then the media picks it up and doesn't do any sort of digging into it, doesn't look at the numbers, doesn't ask for the data, just assumes that it's true and just starts repeating it. And then, celebrities pick it up and start repeating it. And then it just passes like a virus through culture. And all of a sudden people think that, trans women are being hunted in the streets. This came up, Kamala Harris at the LGBT town hall. Someone interrupted her and said, we're being hunted. And she said, I know you are. And it's just not true. There's not a serial killer going around terrorizing trans women. What's happening is that they're being terrorized by misinformation that typically well-meaning people continue to spread because they're just not skeptical.
So in closing, because you're so smart, and people should follow you and read everything you do. You're one of the best follows on Twitter, Kitty Herzog on Twitter. You are somebody that I think has, you've ruffled a lot of feathers. And I do we get back to facts ever in this country? Do we get back to objective information? Or is anybody going to be able to say what you just said without, your intentions being challenged and being called a Nazi and a racist and fuck Herzog, spray painted on the outside of the stranger? Is anybody going to be able to have these conversations ever again Do we see is anything positive culturally happening right now that might lead us back to a more fact-based, rational discourse in this country?
No.
There it is. And I agree. And by the way, agreed. I agree with you.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
Here's what I think is going to happen. I think that we're in the midst of a mass hysteria. And it's not just what's happening
It's like
right
the
now,
Salem
like
witch
pandemic
trials,
stuff.
but many of those women were witches.
And oddly enough, being a witch is also very trendy right now. So I think we're in the midst of these things happen in American culture, or not just American culture. They happen all across the world. You see things like the Cultural Revolution and communist nations, and the difference between, with lots of the same sort of social strictures, right? So in like Romania in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, they would have these what were essentially like struggle sessions, these like mandatory self-criticism sessions where people would get together and publicly proclaim how they had been enemies of the working class. And usually what they had done was some sort of thought crime. And we're seeing this now, but instead of it being sort of a top-down directive from the government, this is coming from the bottom up, right? So this is coming from the culture where people, particularly like, sort of elite middle class or upper middle class, highly educated white people are voluntarily sort of taking place in these struggle sessions because of a like real sense of guilt and a real sense of like profound shame about what people with our skin tone did before we were alive in many cases. So I think that's where this is going. I hope that I'm wrong. And I think it's going to last for years. I think that we're seeing something break open now that is going to spread farther and wider throughout society. And people are going to get scareder and scareder to speak their minds and to be honest. And I'm deeply concerned about it. I don't think this is how like the end of the world. I think that we're in a moment.
Swing back like we swung to Trump, and now we're going to swing back the other way now.
I keep wondering, like, it would be very interesting to me. You know, there's all this panic about Trump sort of issuing authoritarianism into the United States, which he has absolutely not been able to do as much as he would like to. And I keep thinking, like, what if he does issue authoritarianism but it's not the federal government, it's coming from the resistance, right? It would be sort of like perfectly ironic if we do devolve into this authoritarian society where nobody can say what they believe. And I'm not talking about, I think that norms should exist in society. I don't think that we should have no rules and people should just go around, screaming racist shit or whatever. I don't think that. The problem is that what is acceptable thought, what is acceptable to express has become increasingly narrow, right? So I'm talking about just like talking about the realities of biological sex, these things that are basic mainstream opinions. That's what I'm worried about being pushed out of the conversation. Did you see the
thing today where somebody said Trump just enshrined biological sex as defined to men and women in the law? All trans health care is now wiped out. This is what you see on Twitter. And people are saying that's why what J.K. Rowling said was so detrimental and dangerous. Is any of that true?
I haven't looked into this. I saw this floating around Twitter. I think what they did was just from like reading a headline and really not reading into it at all. I think what they did is roll back protections under the Obamacare, under the Affordable Care Act for trans people, which I'm against. I think that insurance companies should cover trans healthcare. I think that's probably what it's about.
But they're linking. Their argument is that J.K. Rowling's expression that men and women exist is the reason that. Yeah.
Dude, this has been in the works for a long time, and I highly doubt that Trump is dictating public policy based on J.K. Rowling.
Well, I doubt not that particular tweet, but they're saying that's the problem with biological essentialists is that which it's so funny, biological essentialists. I mean, even to just say that word, but when you have those types of opinions, though they allow governments to take away healthcare from trans people.
I think that's on its face. I don't think that.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Two issues that are unconnected. J.K. Rowling, she wrote a piece called like Turf Wars or something, and it's sort of an explainer about why she came out recently and sort of dipped her toe in the conversation about trans stuff. And she's referring to something really specific that's happening in the UK, this Gender Recognition Act, which would move from a process. There's basically, because of the NHS, the National Health Service there, if you want sort of trans health care, you have to basically go in front of a panel. I think I'm getting this right. You basically have to go through there's steps that you have to go through to get healthcare. There's sort of more of a gatekeeper method there. And then in like 2018 or something, ironically, the Conservative Party introduced this Gender Recognition Act. And the reason they did this was because this was on the heels of gay marriage, and gay marriage was such an overwhelming popular success. So they thought like, hey, we'll just like, we'll like jump on this bandwagon and do something for the trans people, and everybody's going to love us. And so what they proposed was this law that would make a sex change would be basically self-declaration, right? So if you say right now that you're a woman, legally you are female and you have access to women's spaces. If I say I'm a man, I have access to men's spaces. And so the Conservative Party proposed this. And then there was a massive backlash, not just between like radical feminists who don't want trans women in their spaces, but like Catholic women and mainstream normies, just women who said like, we are uncomfortable with this. So she's talking about something really specific and not trans healthcare. And I think she like affirmed her belief that trans people should have access to healthcare.
Right. One last question. You said you got into writing about detransitioning because you were interested in heretics, and now you've kind of become a heretic. Yeah. Do you think you manifested that? Did you want to always kind of live on the outside of mainstream? I mean, I kind of do, which is why I'm a comedian, right? Like my job, I guess other than prostitution, is like the second oldest job. Like I'm like the town crier, I'm the fool, I'm the whatever. Like I'm the guy that's in the public square just shouting, and then people come by and throw them change or whatever. But what about heretics so fascinated you, and you seem very comfortable being one?
I guess that's probably because I haven't left my house in 3 months, and so I'm I no longer have people screaming at me. Yeah, I mean, there's probably an element of self-reflection there. I don't think it was conscious at the time, but I would say that the writing that I've done before and and after that piece tends to I try to find the unexpected in things, and I've learned that almost nothing you see is as it appears to be, and so I think that's in part why I'm drawn to these things. And the more I read, the more I realize that everything I think I know about the world is more complex than I thought. So
yeah, it's like the more and more informed you get, the less you feel like you have any clue of what's going on.
And the less you realize you can trust institutions. And I don't want to be like, I'm not Donald Trump. Unfortunately, I don't have his money or his spray tan. But, I don't believe in I don't want to be like the fake news person or whatever. But I will say like a lot of mainstream and
I mean, we saw the Covington thing. The Covington thing happened was completely fake. Jussie Smollett. Right. I mean, there's a lot. We've seen a lot.
Okay, I got a question for you. So as a gay dude. Yeah. How long did it take for you to think like, oh, Jussie Smollett, that was bullshit?
Well, what bothered me about the Jussie Smollett thing, and this is what always bothers me, and I've spent my life in New York City, LA, I've been to Chicago a bunch. I've witnessed very few things that I would consider, and I've been in places where everybody's drunk. I spent a lot of time with drunks in comedy clubs and things like that. People have yelled things out at me. I mean, it's part of the fucking contract you sign up for when you're a comedian. I've been on subways late at night and all that stuff. The idea that there were these Trump-supporting gang of people in a metropolitan city committing hate crimes seemed very weird to me. Impossible? No. But it seemed odd to me that when I heard that, it made me go, huh, really? Mm-hmm. At 2 a.m., there's just guys with Trump hats on going after Jussie Smollett, who's getting a Subway sandwich at 2 a.m.?
Yeah, that was the thing that got me. I was like, aren't you rich? Why are you eating Subway?
Why aren't you Postmating or Grubhubbing something? It's freezing? And I did a video about this several weeks later. I was attacked by Elizabeth Warren supporters. I was hit with feathers in a headdress, and I was attacked. And so I understand what it's like. But yeah,
did they come back and apologize to you after it turned out that he was full of shit? I'm sure that they did.
Well, the weird thing about me is again, I came out late in life. I came out at 25. Then I started stand-up comedy. right away. I quit drinking the same year. So you had all of these things happen at once. I became essentially another person, right? I never had the time to like just be gay for 2 years and like just party and drug it up and fuck. I came out, I had to stop doing drugs and drinking, and I started doing comedy. So it was this weird, but I was an actor as a little kid. Like I had a lot of traditionally gay experiences, right? I'm insanely talented and gorgeous. So when you have
you
those,
look like a ballerina.
I do. And you know what? I look like how they do when they don't do as well, because I've seen older ballerinas. So the reality is you're wrong and right at the same time. But I always, here's the thing, man. I hate groupthink. I've always hated it. It's so weird to me. It's the antithesis of humor, like this weird kind of cultish. I was a drug addict. I understand what it's like to live this binary existence of like, I'm either high or I'm sober, I'm getting drugs, I'm not getting drugs. And so to me, when I got rid of drugs and I stopped drinking and I went into comedy and I was doing this and I was following the path that I should be following, like I really started to get weird about people that had, no room for nuance. Cause I'm like, that's where everything lives. Everything lives in nuance. Jokes live in nuance. And I've always a fan of like, people say I don't present as gay, so it's easier for me. 100% true. They're 100% right about that. But like, being gay is the 10th most fucked up thing about me.
Right.
In terms of the life I've lived. I mean, I bought a house when I was 22 with a subprime mortgage on cocaine. I mean, most people wake up, gay people will wake up, or straight people wake up next to someone and go, how did I get here? I woke up in a $700,000 home and said, how did I get here? And then there was a stack of
there's a title beside you?
Yeah, and I owned the property. So I had done all this weird shit. I mean, I dropped acid on 8th grade stage of my graduation. I was doing acid when I was in 8th grade. I was doing cocaine in 8th grade and 9th grade. Wow. I was hanging out at crack houses. I was like doing wild stuff. And then I was selling subprime mortgages for a long time, trying to help the country, really. And I was just involved in all this weird shit, man. And to me, sexuality is a part of the story, but it's not the whole story. For most people, it is their whole story. For most gay people, it is. There's nothing wrong with that, because it's like...
It is, but
there is, right? Yeah.
I mean, you're completely right. I mean, I find it I find it aggravating, and I don't find it interesting at all. But and like I lived like mostly in sort of queer circles for most of my life until I basically got excommunicated in the last few years. And when I think back about that time, it's like all we talked about was being gay. That's all we talked about. That's so fucking boring.
I mean, it is
everything
boring.
Everything was gay. Somebody be like paper or plastic, and I'd be like, I'm gay. It's just like, it was just fucking boring.
It's boring.
It's boring.
It's weird.
And now that's everywhere. That's
it's everywhere.
Everybody.
Everyone's gay now, and it's weird. So I always felt like, I'm sure I had internalized homophobia, this, that, and the other thing. But then, like, there was a time in comedy when I started doing comedy, when I said I was gay on stage, people would say, ew, or like people would be like openly hostile to it. But then it turned to where like I even like in longer sets I say it, in short sets I stopped saying it, because when I said it, people would clap. And that's like the worst thing in comedy. People would be like, good for you, good for you. And then I'm like, oh, enough. What a weird fucking thing. What? Yeah. But people are heavily invested in that which makes them unique. And if what makes you unique is your sexuality, and otherwise you're a basic bitch person, if what makes you unique is your sex, which is what I love about all these people. They're like, I'm queer and I love the Real Housewives and I love, Frappuccino. And I'm like, you're just a basic bitch.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you sleep with. You have nothing unique about you.
Groups of queers are conformists, like every other group. They are. Right. I mean, they are.
Right.
It's just any group. You have we break up into these tribes. It's not that different from high school, and they're all like each other. And that's, I guess, an offensive thing to say, but this comes from like long observations of hanging out with these communities.
Yeah, I mean, how does it affect you? Like, when you say you're excommunicated, do you just not get the invites anymore?
Dude, no.
Yeah.
I like basically live a pretty friendless existence. And I do have, I have like 3 or 4 friends. I mean, most of them are older.
Normal.
Like I have friends in like their 60s and 70s now. And
just
part of that is also
some old mountain lesbian you talk to who just
she's actually not a lesbian. She's straight. She lives on a houseboat and she chain smokes inside side.
Oh
She's
my
brilliant.
God. See,
One of the
but
most
see,
brilliant
this
people.
is what you want. That you don't want a lot of friends. I want a houseboat chain smoker.
Right.
Yeah.
She like moved to Seattle in the fucking 70s to learn how to be a pilot. I mean, she's just fascinating. Or I could hang out with queer people who only talk about being queer.
Right.
What do you prefer? So yeah, I would say I don't have very many friends, but I do have a wife and a dog, so I'm still
You're an
technically
adult.
gay.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it's like when
I'm an adult.
When you look at the 60s, Camille Paglia talks about this. When you look at like what because there was a lot of similar ideas happening, but it was all about sensory experiences and LSD and the body and people fucking and free love and Hinduism and like, expanding your mind. And then you look at this revolution and it's all about like nitpicking language and like a very churlish, secretarial, weird, bureaucratic, sexless, fearful existence. And you're like, whoa, they got everything wrong. They took like everything from the 60s and now it's like
They took the bad shit.
they took all the bad shit. Now it's people just chewing their tongues on Adderall, going on tweet threads. It's like crazy. And what's scary is what's next. That's what's always scared me. I'm like, is violence next? Because it seems like everywhere in the culture, from celebrities to the media, there is just violence is being excused and even like in certain corners of the media, agitated and like requested.
Right. It's justified because it's violence in the name of a righteous cause. I don't think people are very aware of like recent history and around the world. It's not like any of this is new.
Yeah.
And
right.
Which in some ways is good because we can see sort of these patterns. Humans, these mass panics, these hysterias, they come and they go. And I think we're in one, and you can't really see it until it's over.
Tell people where to find you. Where can they support you? Where can they read your stuff?
So my podcast is sort of my main thing now. I decided I don't want to be a writer anymore. Words are over, or writing is over. I'm just going to be a speaker now. So my podcast is called Blocked and Reported, and we're on Patreon. It's like Blocked and Reported at Patreon. I don't know what it is. You can Google it. I'm on Twitter at Kitty Herzog, and I guess that's the only places I want you to find me.
That's where she wants to be found. She's a one-woman wrecking crew doing battle against autistic trans communists. And if there's not
trouble.
If you don't see the value in that, well, I don't know what to tell you. Thank you for doing the show. I appreciate it. You're not a retweeter. She never retweets what I do, but I enjoy her anyway. She doesn't retweet. I keep big tabs on that. She never retweets, but that's okay. But she's a follow on Twitter, man. If you're not following Kitty Herzog on Twitter, she's a great follow. I love the way her mind works. It's very, very fascinating. And good luck, man. Listen, Patreon and all of these things are the future. Like one of the things, and I'll kind of close with this, what bothers me about people in my industry is that they're supposedly super progressive, but they're all married to these archaic institutions. They're like, let's reform Hollywood. It's like, what are you saying? Create your own avenues. You have the technology to do your own thing. I've made 100 sketches in the past 2 years. They're funny. They get millions of views. They've never been on television. We put them on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. We put out 2 podcasts a week. Nobody inhibits us from doing this. There's no editor. Nobody's telling us what to say or what to do. And we live and die on basically the response of the audience. And yet so many of the most progressive, most evolved minds of my business still refuse to do that because they don't really want to put their talent in the hands of the audience. They want to they like these cartels. As much as they don't want to admit that, they love these cartels of people that will either green light something they want to do or not. So it'll be what you're doing right now, what I'm doing. I mean, this is just kind of it. This is kind of it.
Yeah, and it's actually working out. It's shocking.
Yeah, it's shocking. Well, listen, good luck with everything. Thank you. You're welcome back anytime. I appreciate it. I know it was an honor for you today to speak to me. And,
it was. Thank you, Tim.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.